Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. Tonight, we have, to my right, Tracy Baggiano.
Good evening.
And to my other right, Mala Mahadevan.
Hi, good evening.
Tom is not here this evening. We'll come up with some canon-appropriate reason for why he's not here. He's smuggling illegal killer robots across the border. I won't tell you which border, though, because I don't want him to get caught. So the format of Shop Talk, it's a water cooler in the cloud. So it's a cloud cooler. Basically, interaction happens via Twitch chat. Drop your questions, comments, thoughts in Twitch chat. I will read them out loud, sort of like Ron Burgundy. So I can tell San Diego what you really believe. And if you have questions afterwards, hit us up, shoptalk@tripass.org. That way, we can think about your question, give you a good answer. If you pop it in chat right now, we'll give you an okay answer. Maybe it'll be good. It's sort of a dealer's choice of answers. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, Pass has gone professional. And I wanted to make mention of that. I'll drop a link in chat for the announcement from Wendy Pastrick, saying that there will, in addition to the existing free tier for Pass, there will be an optional professional tier, a paid tier. And so I wanted to gauge people's thoughts on this, get an idea of what you were thinking about it. Let me talk just a few seconds about what it includes. I have to talk just a few seconds because the opening blog post leaves a lot of to be determined in sense of what this will include. So Wendy is clear to point out that the existing membership is still there, still has the same access to the same things as before. So same access to virtual groups, SQL Saturdays, still all that is the same. Marathons, everything as far as the free tier is staying the same. This is an in addition to offering. And the idea is, I guess, to get more learning and networking opportunities. This will be a little difficult. I mean, I will tell you that I am softly on the fence. I don't really even have a strong opinion. It's going to be really hard to goad me into a rant on this topic. So I'm sure you guys can push if you really want to. But Mala, you have thoughts on things.
Yeah, well, this is not a new idea for Pass. It existed many years ago. I think it must have been 17, 18 years ago. I don't remember how much money we paid every month, but we did have a small sum of money attached to being a member of Pass, in return for which you got an email, I think, with the Pass domain attached to it, and you got a newsletter and you got announcements about the summit and all kinds of stuff, which were pretty novel for those days, considering that we were the only dedicated database conference and the database group of its kind, purely volunteer run, based on a Microsoft product, while all other Microsoft product user groups were owned and operated by Microsoft. We were an independent group offering independent criticism, opinions, viewpoint about the product, purely volunteer run. So we were one of a kind. And it was attractive at many levels. But even back then, it wasn't much of a revenue spinner. It did make for a number of people who were, if you're paying for something, it's logical to presume that you're somewhat serious about it, even if it's a small sum of money. So the members they had were all people who were interested at that level and were willing to pay that sum of money for it. And later on, it went away because it wasn't much in terms of money anyway. And the summit started to grow in leaps and bounds. So that is the history behind it. And like Kevin rightly said, right now what's going on is still, it's got a lot of gray areas. Nobody clearly knows what it is. But I would say this, that we are still a unique group of its kind, purely volunteer run, based on a Microsoft product. Although they want to disassociate themselves with that, we're still primarily SQL Server professionals. So $10 is not much for a database person. So I would suggest anybody who considers considers that worthy, please do sign up and help. We are in trouble with the COVID crisis without a live conference, which is the main revenue spinner. So anyway, anybody can help, even with the small token membership, would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, I don't have a very strong opinion. I understand where it's coming from. I think the way I would spin it, or my take on it at least, it's probably not even a good spin, but my take on this is essentially, if you're selling it as providing goodwill, that for what the organization has done to help out, and in return, you may not necessarily get the full value of that money, but you're kind of cashing in some of the goodwill. And for organizations, especially ones that are in trouble, that is a viable short to medium term strategy. Now, long term, there has to be commensurate value attached to membership. And something Tracy pointed out was that PASS is not the only database organization that is doing this kind of thing.
Yes, the Oracle official user groups charge money to be part of their user groups. And I will say that PASS was looking at this last year at Summit before COVID, because I was on a panel where they were discussing different revenue options. And this is one of the ones that they had on the table, was a membership type option. So it's not just COVID related and they all of a sudden need to get money. Might be why they're pushing it so fast, but they were already looking at alternate revenue for money and stuff before everything went kaboom and we ended up in a pandemic.
Right, before March stretched on for 20 weeks.
Yeah, before that.
Yeah.
What day is it again?
Exactly. It's the 154th day of March.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was trying to keeping up.
Stupid Mayans, their calendar ran out in March of 2020. So yeah, that I think you're right about that. Look, we've known that PASS has been in monetary trouble for a couple of years now. And when you are so heavily bound on one particular revenue stream, there is a problem. So it makes sense. Raymond asks, where would you donate even if it was a token gesture? And I think you could treat, right now, you kind of have to treat the Pass Pro membership as essentially a non-tax deductible donation. I don't think there's enough value in it today to say, oh, yes, let me give you $80 because I directly benefit from this. I think that what they're trying to build up is something that says, here's why you would pay the extra. At that point, it would be $120 a year. Here's why you would pay us $120 a year when you could be a Pass member for free. That there has to be some value. Right now, it's like, okay, I can see the benefit of saying, Pass has helped out. I want to see this organization continue. I will pay the $80 to help diversify their revenue stream and offset some of the losses that are going to happen this year due to much less populated Pass Summit. Now, those are my words and my speculation. I have no ties to Pass, really. I run a user group. That's about it.
SQL Saturday.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, there's a SQL Saturday, but again, that's like, it's so far out in the periphery that I'm not given any special information.
True.
So this is all coming from me and my lukewarm depths of my spleen, because it's not even a heart thing at this point, it's just spleen. Usually you have to push me a little harder to get me splenetic, but so other trade organizations actually tend to have membership tiers. Like, I remember back in the day, ACM and IEEE, they would allow college students free access. There was a free or reduced price tier, but then professionals, you had to pay for that membership. And they're both still around. It's probably more of interest in the academic world as opposed to the professional world. But
so I tried TDWI once. It has been a while, and their membership is also expensive, really expensive.
Yeah. Different trade organizations. I mean, outside of the technical world, trade organizations typically cost money. We are, I think there's an interesting dynamic in this technical community world where you expect so much from speakers, from authors, from people to willingly give away content because they want to spread information and help people learn. And there's a big community, there's an ethos of that. And B, that learners don't necessarily have to put much in. That is the norm, that the information is available. Information wants to be free. There are organizations around it which, they still need money. So I won't ask Mala because it's an unfair question to ask. Would you become a pro member? We'll ask chat. Do you see this being a thing that you would do?
So I'll answer even if you didn't ask me.
I didn't want to put you in a corner.
Quite a significant amount of my career has been because of my association with PAS and because of the people I met via the summit and the different volunteering opportunities that they offered. I've written a few blog posts on it. I mean, my blog is quite a lot of my blog is about PAS anyway. So much, but yeah. I mean, in the interest of gaining them a little bit of extra revenue, and also considering the fact that it's not that much of money, I have to do it. That's purely my personal thing.
What do you think, Tracy?
I agree with Mala. I've gotten a lot out of PAS. I wouldn't mind seeing where this is at in a year and going ahead and paying for a year and see where it develops. And see from there.
Yeah, I'm a soft maybe. And I would not invest in it for the value. It would be more of a gesture of goodwill that, all right, you've helped me out. Let me help out here in this way. That only goes so far, and I think that they're going to have compelling content. They're going to have compelling reasons to say, yes, here's why you want this level of organization. Because there's only so much goodwill that you can get out of a person. So we'll see. We will probably come back to this topic someday in the future, especially after they flesh out a little bit of what they have. Pretty obvious that this was released in a time when it wasn't fully ready. And I think that's an issue because you can't sell it as this is worth the money. Not today. Like there will be educational series, there will be learning content, but it's not there yet. And there will be other things in the future that we haven't thought about yet, or that we can't announce yet. Like, okay, I mean that's fair. That's reasonable to be upfront and say, yeah, we don't know what we're offering, but that's still it's a tough sell. Beat Up says hello back to you. So that was Pass Pro membership. Interested to hear people's thoughts in the audience and see if it may be something you're interested in. I'll drop that link one more time. I believe at this point registration for it opens up maybe tomorrow?
It's tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's technically not open yet. But there is the link to the resources. There's a link to what available information is public, and tomorrow we'll see what they have available for us. So I wanted to completely pivot, talk about a different topic. Architectural diagrams. Specifically, why are they so bad usually? Why is it so difficult to do a good diagram? Raymond says planning to join just for the community, and hopefully they get a fairly good outpouring for that. I think that would at least buffer for this year, and if they're able to get past this year, maybe they can get some more stable long-term development. Okay, architectural diagrams. There's a lot of, you want to be polite, there's a lot of variance in quality. So Mala, that does show up on screen. That's actually kind of cool. So what makes for a good diagram? If I said to you, here's an architectural diagram, what are you looking for?
Something that makes sense.
That
So something that tells me how the foundation or the infrastructure is laid out, and I want to find a good books online example because they have some good diagrams of certain architectures. So essentially, it's much easier to grasp than it is reading through a bunch of stuff. How things are laid out at a higher level. That's what I look for.
yeah, and I'm going to drop in a picture, one of the ones that you're thinking about. This is actually the Azure IoT reference diagram, and let me share that on screen. Let's see what we got here. So the tool that I use to display actually updated to where I don't have to click full screen everything anymore. I just get share screen. That's not bad. Here's an example of a reference diagram from Azure, and this is for IoT Hub. While this is up, Raymond mentions that architectural diagrams stink due to the UX of the audience. Who is the audience? How data flows, supporting systems in question. And I think that's fair. That's fair. So what we have here is just basically about a dozen or so elements, and they're all at pretty similar levels. So a couple of things that I like to think about when going through an architectural diagram is if you're drawing boxes, are the boxes at about the same level? If I have a box that represents a service on a machine and another box that represents the machine itself, you can think about how those, one is inside the other or attached to the other somehow. If I have something that represents a service on a machine and then I have something that represents a cluster of machines, that can be a little bit more difficult to follow. You have to be clearer in your intentions to get people to understand that there is a scope difference here. And you can do that, for example, if you are, say, talking about a service that connects to a Hadoop cluster, pulls data back, something like Polybase. And in that case, it makes sense to have both of those at that level, because at that point, the cluster is a thing of its own. There are no subdivisions that are interesting at that high level. Another thing that I want to point out here is that typically for one of these diagrams, there aren't that many components. As you get more and more components, it is harder to differentiate or harder to understand what's even going on. So Raymond says, nice diagram, 50K view. What you need to do to dig down to detail, that may derail the prior levels in question. Yes, getting down into detail, absolutely, you're right, that this is intended to be a high-level understanding. So one of the things that I've done before that, oh, thank you, is, let's say, what do I want? AWS reference architecture. And you do a quick Google search of images for AWS reference architectures, and I'm not the biggest fan of AWS reference architectures because I think that they tend to do two things. One is you see the same elements showing up over and over and over to where they could be combined together reasonably. This one doesn't do that, but if I pop over to, say, one of their IoT reference architectures, well, here actually might be one, because I noticed, oh no, this is actually the same thing. Okay, but in some of those cases with, say, driverless cars, actually I have it in Git pitch. Graph databases, Lakehouse. Let's figure out, nope, it's the next section. So this is a talk that I've put together on different data platform technologies. And I'm trying to find out, here it is. This is the AWS Connected Vehicle Solution infrastructure. And one of the issues that I have is like half a dozen mentions of Lambda and Dynamo, Lambda and Dynamo, Lambda and Dynamo. You're using the same technologies over and over, and I'm not learning that much. I suppose you learn some from trip data and driver safety score, but at this level, it's hard to say, why do you need 5, 6 different, 7 different instances of Lambda? Are they different functions? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's the same couple of functions. Are these different Dynamo databases? Maybe. That's a tricky thing to answer because it doesn't give us enough detail about the why. Icon Pro says because it's limited to 2D. So let me pull one of these up because frankly, this is their 3D diagram. Now it's a lot better. I don't even understand why you have the 3D diagram like this. That this is actually something that Amazon is pushing out, that yeah, here's our real-time stream processing. This is the type of thing that I would expect to see in a computer magazine from the 1990s. It is not a reference architecture. But that's what they're pushing. Like, this is ugly. A, it's ugly. B, it's adding that third dimension does nothing for us. C, it's still just too vague. And I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, Azure diagrams are always better. They're always great. Because there are bad Azure diagrams. But on net, actually, I think the Azure diagrams do a better job.
And those yellow words are just hard to read beside the little 3D objects.
There's a contrast problem.
And on the side too, yeah, but just beside the objects themselves, it's like
it's not even Azure diagrams.
S3. Yeah. Oh yeah, it is S3. It's like it's not very yucky.
Right. Low contrast.
They have some good diagrams, Microsoft, of other non-Azure stuff too, which I've liked quite a bit. I think one of them, when they started going down this road with the graph extension of SQL Server, they had that diagram pretty well, easy to understand. And I think they have one for extended events too. I'll have to look, but there are a few that are pretty decent.
Right. Raymond says the arrows and icons do look good. All right. It looks futuristic from the 1990s. Icon Pro, the other diagram was a 3D diagram that was run over by a steamroller, sort of like the Naked Gun. So there's an article, an InfoQ article. I don't know actually if this is the same one that Raymond is referencing, but the art of crafting architectural diagrams. Tron references. We can go with that. We can go with Tron. I was going a little bit later than Tron, but yeah, we could go with it. Article that I'm going to drop a link in chat to. I thought it was a good description, and there is quite a bit of subjectivity in how you make a good architectural diagram. I think that there's no single answer that says here is the way to make an architectural diagram. But this article does a pretty good job of summarizing what are the most important questions that you have to ask when you have a diagram. So, like in this case, is this all at the right level? Are you getting the components that you need to get? As engineers, we tend to try to slam too many things into a diagram. That I want the diagram to essentially be full documentation. And on the opposite side, when you talk architecture and high-level specking out, it's essentially scribbling on a cocktail napkin. That yeah, we'll have this box will connect to this box, and that's how we'll get our services to integrate. So there's a lot of assumption in an architectural diagram that may be missing at that overly high level. And so, good article that Mala pointed out for us from InfoQ. A little bit lengthy, but check that out. I will have a link to that in the show notes. And I wanted to ask the question to our audience. What kind of tools do you use when creating diagrams? And I'll point out one that I like a lot. Raymond says, funny as C4 is by that author. So that makes sense. You know, it could be that the author was promoting C4 via that article. Solomon, 3D shapes look nice for marketing pieces, but take up too much space for node added value for diagrams used for technical purposes. Exactly right. Also, people have a little bit of difficulty viewing 3D as displayed on a 2D surface. It is not trivial for our minds to turn that into 3D. So this is why you have to have typically more space to show something in 3D than you could in an equivalent 2D, boxes and triangles and squares and circles. You have higher fidelity in 2D than you do in 3D.
Hmm.
Diagrams.net used to be called draw.io, and this is a free product. There's actually an Electron add-on for if you want to play around with it locally, but essentially it's like Visio but free. Icon Pro mentions Visio. Visio is a good product for designing these sorts of diagrams. There are a lot of components that are built in. It is historically one of the products that we used for this, and it's not that expensive. You could generally get away with it at an organization having a copy. So Raymond mentions C4 model, which I'm going to have to take quite a bit of time looking into because this looks like it's a little bit more complicated than what I could fake on screen. So I'm going to take that away and learn a bit about that. But Visio is the tool for me. OmniG on Mac OS. The shapes that make Visio work well. You know, that's... think about that. I think you're right. The shapes, the icon packs, there's a lot embedded in Visio. And one of the things that I have that make diagrams.net a little bit tricky is for fairly generic diagrams, it's great. You know, it's easy to drop boxes on a screen. It's easy to take fairly simple shapes. I don't want to save. I just want to... Oh, you're going to make me save. Okay, fine. There. Couldn't even type in test. I was all flummoxed. But being able to quickly drag on color and give a little bit of sheen to this makes it great for... I'm going to throw together something in 10-15 minutes and give you a story. Actually, I use this to what I think is fairly good effect in a talk that I do on near zero downtime deployment. And if I hop over to the end, there are going to be a lot of slides in here. But basically, I can tell a story of transforming one set of data to a different style using coloration, using differences in color, and get the feel for this was a process. So draw.io let me do that. Let me explain it out in picture form fairly easily, going through the different steps in the process as a story of conversion. But if I wanted to do a diagram where I wanted icons of things, this is not going to give you quite as many nice icons as you would hope. There are some. Like I can search Azure and you'll get some results. I could search, say, GCP, and you'll get BCP instead. So don't know if that's going to be very useful. But AWS, certain cloud services, so you can create your own AWS diagram. All you need to do is take about 5 of these and just keep dragging and dragging and dragging and draw lines between them. And then that's how you get an AWS reference architecture. Being a little mean to AWS reference architectures, but only a little bit. There are some architectures that I think are good that they have displayed. The majority just not great. Another tool that I wanted to point out is called Diagrams as Code. So this is pull this tab over here, diagrams.mingrammar.com, and the idea is that you write Python code and it generates diagrams for you. So, set of clustered services, you can have links flowing. Now, this is because of the underlying Python library that's used for this, it is tricky to do certain types of diagrams. This is really good for left to right or top to bottom flows of things where I have, say, layers of services and want to tie them together. So here's Google Cloud, and I'm pulling in data, putting it through their pub sub system, and then pushing it out to different destinations, putting it out to different sinks. And actually, I use it in the curated data platform talk specifically to tie in key players. This is kind of, I had to hack to get it to work because the reference architecture for MinGrammar are really intended for flow between components. And for me to have a bunch of competitors in a space, like brokers, you know, I wanted to point out, look, there are dozens of brokers. In the speed layer, you have several options available. In the serving layer, several options available. In the batch layer, pretty much one option available. But it was difficult to say, here, just put in a bundle of things and then link category to category. The underlying diagramming tool in Python doesn't let you do that. Are there functional models with that tool, with MinGrammar? And I'm not positive what you mean by functional models, but there are different programming languages and frameworks in here, and there are I would say it's more of hardware solutions or language platforms as opposed to something clearer, something like maybe what you're trying to say, Raymond. But I could be completely misunderstanding you. But still, this is essentially building a graph, displaying that graph, and just trying to tell your story using a graph. Mala has a link to their data science, or excuse me, Synapse Analytics data pipeline example. And yeah, it kind of tells the same story. You have about a half dozen boxes, kind of a similar level. You have a flow, and you have underneath sort of the story that you're trying to tell of how things tie together. So yeah, that does a reasonably good job of it. Lucidchart. I've heard of Lucidchart. I have not used Lucidchart. So Solomon points that out. But it only allows for 3 diagrams if you don't pay for it. That is a downside.
It does plug into like Wiki from like what we use at Channel Advisor and what I use somewhere else. I can't name the name of the brand. And into Jira tickets. Nice.
I used Lucidchart for some time at Channel Advisor, like tried it out. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think the problem we ran into is that the diagrams could not be exported or integrated into our wiki page and things like that, which became really difficult. I can't expect every person viewing it to install Lucidchart. That's what I recall, but it's been a couple of years, so I may be.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So, how to visualize
I think it's
your
important
AWS
for any tool to produce an output that can be integrated into whatever documentation the company has in some form, and not expect everybody to have some kind of a client, installed to view it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Having having that sort of integration critical.
Yes.
This isn't 15 years ago when you could reasonably expect that people are just going to print out your diagram and tape it to the wall. It has to be able to be embedded in things, and it can't be go to this website which has no other documentation and has a completely separate sign-in, and then you'll be able to see this thing. That adds a layer of difficulty to, say, a changing flow over time, that your architectural diagram is changing over time, so you have to be able to push out those changes to people. It does make things difficult. Inkscape was updated recently and supports SVG work. SVG is another important element that ideally you want to be able to use all of your components be SVG, so that I could zoom in. Maybe my eyesight's not great and I want to zoom in on components. Or you could go crazy and have, say, zoom in to get more detail, to where inside your reference architecture, if you zoom far enough, you'll find the architecture for that component. So you may have the data warehouse, and inside there, you might have the more specific details. And you can do that with SVG because it's all vector based, so you don't lose any fidelity as you zoom in and out. But you definitely could not do that with a bitmap style image, JPEG, PNG. If you have a web dev, click and open a document for details. Yeah. That is true. Basically turn it into an image map. Lay it out as an image map, yeah. All right, I want to talk about jobs. But before I get to jobs, first I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go. And I'm gonna bring up Mala's book corner. What do we got this week, Mala?
My books, 2 books as always. The first one is a wee bit old, Naked Statistics by Charles Whelan. Anybody who is curious about data, so figure out what the initial just getting started and don't have a clue, then this is an excellent read. He goes into basic statistical concepts with examples and stories that go with it, what you can answer, what you cannot answer, with probability, with central limit theorem, and a few examples and data sets that go with that. And it's a quick read, and he also explains the concept of data that we know as data professionals is garbage in, is garbage out, and how the conclusion you draw from one set of data, you cannot generalize all over the place, and the limitations of every approach at a very basic level. You're not going to be up and running with solving any problems with this, but it's an intro to what it is about statistical analysis of data. So highly, highly recommended, and it's a quick and easy read. That's the first one. The second one is Graph Data Modeling for NoSQL and SQL by one Thomas Friesendal. I think I'm saying his last name right. Anyway, this book has an introduction by Karen Lopez. Those of us in the SQL world, we know Karen as one of respected architects. So she has an introduction to this, and I was kind of intrigued because there aren't too many books that talk of data modeling with NoSQL. Exactly, the sort of an oxymoronic thing to most people. But I really like it because the author seems to be a proponent of data modeling, and he respects the fact that all data needs some kind of structure to begin with. Even if you want to brag that you can fit anything anywhere, you need to know how data is structured. So he basically starts out with the essential concepts of graph data, nodes and edges, and what constitutes for a graph data and all of that stuff. And then he moves on to how you model this into making a solution. And he talks about a logical model where, like all we do how things look in theory, and then he goes on to what he calls a business data model, and that is entirely his own term. That is, you talk to the business users and you understand what their needs are and the basic concept essentially of modeling graph data is to an ease of query. So you talk to your users and understand what their querying needs are, and you design whatever it is based on that. And so he explains that part with a lot of examples and a lot of different rules. I think he has 40 to 50 different rules on how, which to me is a bit of a stretch. But, I don't think anybody is going to go through 40 rules to model data. But he comes up with a lot of rules like that and how you construct what he calls a business data model. And then carry it over to the physical implementation, which is very different based on what tool graph database you're choosing to implement in, including, if you want to keep it relational, that too. So he does not go into the last aspect, the actual implementation, which is why I think a lot of the bad reviews on Amazon are about is because whatever he's explaining does not seem to translate. He does not have an end-to-end example in the book on how he works it out. But I think even for the amount of information he has, it is worth reading and understanding how you can understand graph data and model nodes and edges based on your querying needs with the users. So I would give it like maybe a 3.5 out of 5, but still a unique book. And I really appreciate his respect for data modeling, despite being someone who dabbles a lot in the NoSQL.
Okay, great. So links to both of those are in chat and will be in the show notes. While that was going on, Icon Pro asks, any ideas on drawing analog diagrams, such as in a meeting, especially an online meeting using a device? So easiest way would probably be a whiteboarding tool. If everybody's using Windows, Microsoft Whiteboard is okay. Windows Ink is all right. It works a lot better if you have a tablet, a Wacom tablet or a Wacom tablet, or if you have a touch screen with a pen. You're not going to have nearly the same level of tactile feel as you'll have when drawing on paper, and that will be frustrating. It won't even be as good as drawing on a whiteboard. Whiteboard, you lose a lot of that pencil perfect feel, and you sort of have to draw larger letters. Things fall off a little easier, smear. It's that, but worse with computer. And yeah, I think having a tablet where you can draw, having a touch screen where you can use a pen, absolutely helps you out in that regard. As far as tooling goes, Microsoft Whiteboard, Windows Ink, those are a couple of good tools. There are several online whiteboards. I've actually used whiteboards on Android as well. So I'm going to pull up the name of one of them. I think it was called, make sure this is the right app. So yeah, Miro, M-I-R-O. So this is another tool, except this is more of drawing it on your phone or on your tablet. Do you prefer a dedicated device? Not necessarily. I have, for the last decade or so, I have strongly preferred tablets that have touchscreens so that I could draw on them. I think if you have a good Wacom tablet or a reasonable facsimile of one, then attach that to your regular computer, and it's just another peripheral. Raymond has a link to OpenBoard, which looks like a GPL'd whiteboard. So yeah, there are a few options for software. To be honest, I still prefer to draw things on paper, because I I want that tactile feel that I just don't really get with a tablet. But there are tools around for this. And they're better than nothing. Like when you can't be in person with anybody else, that's probably a lot cheaper than buying a couple of Jamboards. So if you're not familiar with Jamboard, it is a product that Google purchased, and it's really cool because it's an internet-capable whiteboard that is pretty large. It's 4 feet diagonal, 5 feet diagonal, 6 feet diagonal. Only about $10,000 a piece, so get one for each member of your team. The nice part about it is that you can have Jamboards. Like at where I work, we have one in North Carolina. We have one in Madrid, Spain. So they can be interacting. You can see if somebody draws on one, you can see it on the other. So, very last thing that I want to talk about tonight is jobs. First, Anders had a link. Anders has some hiring at his company. Now, Tracy has a link. You want to talk about your position, Tracy?
Yes, we're looking for a lead database administrator to work in our Chicago office for a sister company of DocuSign that DocuSign owns. Looking for someone that's really good at AGs and replication. So if you think you are the one or one of your friends are, hit me up on Twitter. I'll look at your resume and I can get your recommendation in, which will put you to the top of the stack rather than you applying directly.
Yeah, and for Anders' job, if you are interested, hit me up, shoptalk@tripass.org. I will pass along Anders' details so that you can follow up with questions. Also, friend of the user group, Rick Hygus, who's out of High Point, but working for Microsoft, wanted to have me send out a link for GlaxoSmithKline. They are hiring quite a few people in the Triangle area. Data analysts, data engineers, data scientists. They're also looking for some program manager types who are very familiar with Azure Cloud technologies. So check those out. We've had some discussions about how it's been really difficult to find jobs during this current 20 weeks of March. And so as a result, I wanted to, when I hear about jobs, I wanted to pass them along and make sure that people knew about them. So with that, we are going to wrap things up for tonight. Quick upcoming events. Tomorrow, Kathy Kellenberger is going to talk to us about the topic of technical writing. Next Tuesday, Brian Shalloway will hit us up about database interaction via R. And wanted to mention that Pass Summit is available. Registration coming up. I have a pre-con at Summit all about IoT. So if you're interested in IoT, definitely check that out. Tracy has a session. Tom has 2 sessions. I have a session. And if you want a referral code, if you want a discount for money off of Pass Summit Virtual Edition, our discount code, LGDISCWY7. So that's also in chat. We'll make sure it is in the show notes. For later in November, basically end of November into the first week of December, we have Data Platform Summit, where I actually have a pre-con on Python, analysis in Python with, Python and SQL. So let me drop that in here. I'm just hitting everybody up with links. If you want a discount code for that, Kevin at DPS. And with all of that link spam at the very end, I'm surprised my own bot didn't ban me. But with that, we are going to wrap up tonight's show. Goodbye, Mala. Mala's connection must have dropped off. But thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.